So I want to talk about a scandal, a crime, which if we were living in any other period in American history, and this were any other president, this would end him. This would end his presidency. Now, I don't expect that this is going to end his presidency, although it should, and maybe it will, but we'll see. And I'm talking here about his murder of people who he says are drug smugglers from Venezuela. This has been going on for a while now, and he's done this on several occasions now, where he has ordered the military to blow up and murder everyone aboard small boats that are out in international waters more than 1,000 miles from American shore. And this is a crime because he has absolutely no authority to do this. And he should be impeached and removed from office for this and prosecuted for his crimes. I don't expect that to happen, but that's what should happen. And just because we might expect that he's going to get away with these things doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about how they are illegal and how he should be impeached and removed from office for this. Now, he certainly isn't going to happen right now, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't happen in the future. And I don't think we should give up on trying to see that one day this man is held accountable for his crimes. Now, I've got a few articles here that I want to read. Because, you know, Trump has been stonewalling, informing Congress about exactly what he did, why he did it, the evidence that he says he has for who he says these people are, and his legal justifications for ordering the use of lethal force against these people. And he's been stonewalling because he doesn't have any legal authority. It was a crime. And his rationales, his legal justifications from him and from others involved in all of this, Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth and the rest, their explanations keep changing because they're lying. And because they realize now, because Congress is wanting answers, they know that they've committed crimes. And so they're trying to come up with justifications. And there was a briefing on Capitol Hill on Wednesday about this. Let me read a little of this article from the Wall Street Journal. Headline: Lawmakers from both sides pressed Pentagon on legal basis for drug boat strikes. I got to tell you, I object to that title. Drug boat should be in quotes, if anything, if you're going to use that term, because we have been offered no evidence that these were in fact drug smugglers. Not that it would make any legal difference, it wouldn't. Anyway, let me read a little of this. Senators on both sides of the aisle pressed the Pentagon's top lawyer in a closed-door meeting to provide a better legal explanation for striking alleged Latin American drug boats in the Caribbean. In a classified Senate Armed Services Committee briefing Wednesday, the Pentagon General Counsel Earl Matthews detailed the legal basis for the military's attacks ordered by President Trump. Matthews repeatedly referred to Trump's designation of some Latin American drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, which he said granted the Defense Department unilateral authority to use military force against them. He refused to provide a written justification for the strikes. This is BS. This is apparently the legal justification they've settled on, sending this lawyer to Congress to peddle this. Now, simply designating a drug cartel a foreign terrorist organization does not entitle Trump in any way to any additional authority to use lethal force. It simply does not. If that were the case, then there'd be no giving Congress the authority to declare war would be meaningless, because no president would ever need to go to Congress for a declaration of war. He can just order whoever it is that he wants to attack. He can just designate them as a terrorist organization. So it's absurd. This is not a legal justification. This is a public relations justification, which they hope will be enough. But legally, it's definitely not. Now, I got an article here from the Associated Press. Let me read a little of this. Headline, U.S. is in armed conflict with drug cartels, Trump says. The convicted felon, insurrectionist piece of trash, Donald Trump, has declared drug cartels to be unlawful combatants and said the United States is in a, quote, armed conflict with them. This according to a Trump administration memo obtained by the AP. The memo appears to represent an extraordinary assertion of presidential war powers, with Trump effectively declaring that trafficking of drugs into the United States amounts to armed conflict, requiring the use of military force, a new rationale for past and future actions. Oh, did I get that on video? That's an osprey. Did you see that? It doesn't look like it got its fish. Ooh, here it comes. Am I getting this? What a beautiful bird. Is it gonna go again? Okay, that's enough. I guess we'll see if we got that on video. Anyway, that was cool. Where was I? Okay, a new rationale for past and future actions. Let's be very clear about when a president is authorized to use lethal force in this way. There's only two circumstances. One, if it's authorized by Congress. And the second is when the president must take action to defend the United States against imminent attack of some sort. So basically self-defense of the United States, where there's no time to go to Congress for authorization. That's it. And neither of those situations exists here. Congress hasn't authorized it, and in no way can it be argued credibly that small boats with a few people aboard, a little outboard motor, more than 1,000 miles away from the United States, poses any sort of imminent threat to the people of the United States. It's a joke, it's laughable. But what they're trying to do is to, after the fact and going forward, to come up with a rationale, a legal justification. But this is not a legal justification. This is a PR justification, and it should not work. The president, let me continue here with the AP. The president determined that the United States is in a non-international armed conflict with these designated terrorist organizations. Trump directed the Pentagon to conduct operations against them pursuant to the law of armed conflict. Well, this is not pursuant to the law of armed conflict, because in no way can these people be considered an imminent threat, engaged in armed conflict against the United States. This is outrageous. Quote, the United States, this is from the memo, the United States has now reached a critical point where we must use force in self-defense. See, now they're trying to dress it up in legal jargon here. They're trying to use buzzwords and phrases that make it appear like this is legal, but it's not. They know what the law is, and it is exactly as I have explained. So they're trying to make it appear that this is self-defense when it's not. So the United States has now reached a critical point where we must use force in self-defense and defense of others against the ongoing attacks by these designated terrorist organizations. What a load of crap. As we have said many times, the president acted in line with the law of armed conflict. You know, it doesn't matter how many times you say it, it's not true. It just simply is not true. I'm not going to read this whole article. Let me just read a couple other passages. What the Trump administration laid out at the classified briefing at the Capitol was perceived by several senators as pursuing a new legal framework that raised questions, particularly regarding the role of Congress in authorizing any such action. The memo, which was reported earlier by the New York Times, lays out a rationale seen both as the administration's justification for the military strikes it has already taken on the boats in the Caribbean, which have raised concerns from lawmakers as potentially unlawful, as well as any action to come. They had no legal justification. They didn't think, I don't think they thought they'd even get any questions about it. And now that they have been pressed for answers and justification, legal justification for what they did, now they're scrambling to come up with something that sounds legal, but it's not. Let me jump down here a little bit. The Trump administration is trying to justify the use of military force against drug cartels in the same way the Bush administration justified the war against al-Qaeda following September 11 attacks, said Waxman, who served in the State and Defense Departments and on the National Security Council under Bush. Bush, however, had authorization from Congress, unlike Trump. So whatever you think about the military actions that George W. Bush took, he had authorization from Congress. Trump has no such authorization, and absolutely no exigent circumstances here exist that would justify him acting in our self-defense. This is top to down illegal. Waxman said he expects more strikes, and we'll see if the United States takes the next big steps and engages in lethal force or armed force in the territory of another state, because that's what's being talked about right now. I have another article here. I'm not going to read this, but where did I have this written? Sorry, bear with me here. Oh yeah, okay. Where they're now planning, Trump is preparing to seize ports and airfields in Venezuela and to strike militarily inside the country. Now you can engage in argument about whether something is an act of war or not an act of war. Is killing these people an act of war or not? Doesn't really matter. It's illegal, lethal force. But if you're going to strike inside another country, and I have another report that we have already violated Venezuelan airspace with fighter jets. I think I'm hearing that osprey screeching from a tree. I can't see her. Anyway, it's not debatable that if we're seizing ports and, what did I say? Seizing ports and airfields in Venezuela, that's war. Okay, that's war. And so Waxman says, we'll see if the United States takes the next big step and engages in lethal force or armed force in the territory of another state. Well, if they did that and they seize ports and airfields, that's exactly what they would be doing. That is war. And he would be usurping the power of Congress yet again, because clearly only Congress has the authority to do this. But you know what? Trump has seized their authority in so many other areas, and they have done nothing. They've said nothing. And look, he's imposing tariffs unilaterally. Only Congress has the authority to do that. He is spending money from the Treasury that has not been appropriated by Congress. That's illegal. That is usurping Congress's authority. He is refusing, and the friggin' Supreme Court just rubber stamped it in a certain respect, but he is refusing to spend money that has been by law appropriated by Congress and that he is required by law to spend. So and there's so many other examples of Trump violating the Constitution by seizing the power of Congress. And this would be no different. Only Congress has the authority to declare war. With Trump's taking that one too. So far, Congress has done nothing to stop him in any of these ways. Does anyone think that they'll do anything to stop him if he actually gets the United States involved in a war unilaterally on his own? You know, the Constitution was set up in the way that it was because there was nothing more serious than going to war against another country. And the framers of the Constitution did not want to give the power to drag this entire nation into a war, to give that power to one person. That's why they gave that power to Congress, the elected representatives of the people. The president is not an elected representative of the people. The people do not elect the president directly. The states elect the president. That's why we have the electoral college system. It's not the people who elect the president, it's the states. In fact, I don't want to get off on this tangent, but the Constitution doesn't even require that you and I get to vote for president. Now, each state has chosen to select electors by voting, by votes of the people, but a state could just as easily have the legislature choose the electors for that state, or the governor choose the electors. The people don't even have a constitutional right to vote for president. Anyway, I don't want to get off on that tangent. The only elected representatives of the people in our system is Congress, specifically the House of Representatives. Now, the Senate is because of amendment, but at the time of the Constitution, senators were appointed. They weren't elected either. But anyway, it was Congress who has the authority. They did this very deliberately so as not to allow just one person to drag us into war. And here, Donald Trump, unilaterally, is going to drag the entire country into a war, and Congress is going to let that happen? Well, apparently so. You know, all of this, I'll keep repeating this, but just to remind people that we are not without power. I mean, you and I, our power lies in pressuring Congress. That's the only real power we have in this system. And Congress could end this nightmare right now if they wanted to. They could step up and finally assert their power and use the Constitution to end this. Impeach and remove him from office. That is what should happen. I hope and pray that one day it will. I doubt it, but we'll see. Certainly not going to happen right now, but it should. Anyway, let me get to one final article here real quick. This was from the New York Times a couple days ago. The United States says it has blown up at least 3 drug smuggling boats in the Caribbean, including at least 2 from Venezuela, in a significant escalation of the kind of pressure that Mr. Trump has blah, 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 blah. But with some drugs, I don't want to get in. Where's the part I wanted to read? Okay, so it's talking about him going against using the war on drugs as war on drugs, as that term has been used, not an actual war, but the campaign against, trying to stop drug smuggling into this country, using that as a pretext and a justification for war. That has led many observers to say that the Trump administration's real goal is to go after Maduro, and I think that's definitely true. They want regime change in Venezuela, and they're trying, and they know they could never get Congress to go along with that, or even the public to go along with that as a justification for war. I mean, this is exactly the kind of thing that Trump said we were not going to get involved with anymore. Remember, we're not going to get involved in any country's business anymore. We're not going to use the military to police the world and get involved in all these things. It's none of our damn business. Remember all that? Now he is actively wanting to use the military to force regime change in Venezuela. And I wonder what all those blithering idiots who voted for Donald Trump to be the peace president, and that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were warmongers, so they're going to vote for the peace candidate, Donald Trump. I wonder what all those idiots are thinking right now. Anyway, so he can't sell regime change probably to many people in this country. So he's selling this, this war on drugs as a justification for going to actual war against another country. But here's the part I wanted to get to. It's a long piece in the New York Times, but here is one part. In an interview, talking to Venezuelans here, in an interview, one woman who identified herself as the wife of one of the dead men said that her husband was a fisherman with 4 children who left one day for work and never came back. Again, Donald Trump has offered no evidence of his claims. And Donald Trump is a pathological liar. He lies about everything. Why anyone would take his word, members of Congress, the media, anyone, why anyone would take his word that these people were in fact drug smugglers or narco-terrorists, as he has referred to them, it's insane to take the word of a pathological liar who has offered absolutely no proof whatsoever. And again, even if he did have proof, even if it was rock solid proof, doesn't matter. Legally, it doesn't matter. You don't get to kill people just because they were smuggling drugs. You arrest them. We can interdict drug smugglers. These are a few people on tiny boats. You're telling us our military can't interdict and arrest these people? Question them, find out who they were going to deliver these drugs to in the United States, then go after those people? Blowing them up? Not only is that not the best option, if you really want to get all these people who are involved in these networks of smuggling drugs into the United States, it's stupid. You kill them, you can't find out what they know, where they were going, who they're working in concert with. But beyond that, it doesn't matter. That's not a legal justification. It's a crime. It's murder. It's the unauthorized, illegal, intentional killing of other human beings. That is murder. Donald Trump is using the United States military to commit murder. This man should be impeached. He should be convicted in the Senate, removed from office, and prosecuted for his crimes. And if he wants to argue that he's immune, that this is an official act, and per the Supreme Court decision on this, he's immune from prosecution, fine, let him argue that. And the way that would work is you indict him for his crimes. And when it gets to court, he can file a motion to dismiss and cite the Supreme Court decision. Then let the courts review it. And if they want to dismiss the case and say he's immune for these murders, fine. But he should be impeached, removed, indicted, and prosecuted. We shouldn't preemptively say, oh, well, there's this immunity decision, so I guess he gets away with his crimes. No. Arrest him and prosecute him. And let him fight it out in court. But this is so beyond outrageous, illegal, unconstitutional. But how much worse does it have to get? You know, and I'll end it here. We'll talk more about this. You know, we have these No Kings protests coming up again, which I completely support. And those things are important. But they're just public displays of our anger, of what's going on. And I'm not belittling that. It's important. What we should be doing is more directly channeling our anger and demands towards members of Congress to take action to impeach and remove this criminal. That's what we should be doing. He won't be impeached and removed by this Congress right now. But if we make members of Congress more afraid of us, the people, than they are of Donald Trump, then he will be impeached and removed from office. And politically, I think we should do more to focus our anger and our demands to members of Congress. As good as it is to take to the streets and protest, which absolutely is wonderful, imagine if we were directing those protests in large numbers outside the offices of these members of Congress who are defending this man. We need to make them afraid. Donald Trump has gotten everything he wants from these people because he has made them afraid. We need to make them more afraid of us. That's what we can do. I think that's what we should be doing in all kinds of ways. Politically, mind you. I'm certainly not advocating violence against any members of Congress or anyone else, but politically make them afraid. Put the pressure on them politically. That's the only way that we're going to get this guy out of office. The 25th Amendment is not an option, as I explained in my video yesterday. And if you haven't watched that, please watch it so you really understand how the 25th Amendment works and why it's not an option. The only way to remove this man from office is to use the tool that was specifically designed for this purpose, and that is the impeachment process. We impeach him and we remove him, and then we prosecute him. He is a criminal. Anyway, thanks for watching. I don't know what happened there. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.